There is this phenomenon in the vegan movement right now, where vegans are subscribing to an ethical theory called threshold deontology. Let's have a listen.
I don't think it is ethical to go and murder a person with optimal organ function if it means that 5 people currently on the way to organ failure will end up living. I also don't think that it is more ethical to go ahead and murder a random 300-pound human for food over buying plant food, because doing so would result in less suffering than would occur in a crop field. To me, it is just not always the case that when given multiple choices, that I should make the choice that leads to the least amount of suffering and death. In the case of killing a random person for their organs to save 5 other people, and killing the 300-pound human over buying crops, I would say that both of these instances of killing qualify as a rights violation, and the utility gain from killing the innocent person would not be such that killing the innocent person becomes morally permissible. For those who don't know, my moral system tends to be one more so captured by threshold deontology rather than utilitarianism. So essentially, if you were to scale up the utility gain from an action that I normally take issues with as a rights violation, my attitude may change. For example, if somehow killing one person saved 1 trillion people, I would not have an issue killing them.
But both of the scenarios are essentially the same thing. The only thing different is the number of people getting saved. So he would act like utilitarian, but on steroids. And that leads me to the number. As far as I'm aware, it's all arbitrary.
Then my trade-off point for the trolley problem would be 1,000 people. The morally neutral point would be, well, if 1,000 people are going to be saved, based on how my meta-ethical system is framed, the consistent answer would be, I'm not going to kill for 100, I'm not going to kill to save 200, I'm not going to kill to save 300, but I am going to kill to save 10,001. That would be the trade-off point, because the morally neutral point would be killing one to save 10,000. So within that system, all those answers would be consistent based on how that system is structured. Now, if you want to ask, well, how are you structuring the system? The answer is it has to be arbitrarily, and by arbitrary, I mean philosophically not justified, just like any other axiom is philosophically unjustified.
So you could have 2 people who are both vegans and both threshold deontologists who happen to disagree when it's moral to do something. That's not really helpful. Let's go back to the text. If by intrinsic he means in and of itself, then it will always be wrong, and I have no idea how deliberately doing something which is wrong in and of itself can be morally justifiable, especially if it's done for some arbitrary threshold. Also, if we are to say that murder is unjustified killing, then it wouldn't make any sense to say that murder can be morally justified. We also have this.
The other stance, the stance I take actually, is my ethical view is not a pure consequentialist view. I don't think that everything in any case always will reduce to more torturing and more slaughtering and well-being to suffering ratio. So for example, in the trolley problem, would I kill one person to save 5 people? My answer is no, and I would give the same answer for organ theft. I don't think that if we can take one person and kill them to save 2 or 3 people by harvesting their organs, I don't think I would bite the bullet on that. At a base level, I have 2 axioms. I have a deontologic axiom, and then I have a consequentialist axiom. The deontologic axiom is a concern for self-interest, and it's basically negative rights. I think that at the base level, negative rights would win out. The right to not directly harm other people, the right to not be harmed, and I would extend that to animals as well. At some point, though, I would switch over. So at some point, if I was asked, would I kill one person to save 1 million people? At some point, I would switch over. The consequences, if we have a consequentialist axiom, the consequences would weigh out.
If negative rights morally doesn't allow him to kill, then introducing 1 million more people into the equation wouldn't change anything, because the very thing which doesn't allow him to kill is still there. But other than that, what if I violate rights and accidentally minimize or prevent rights violations? Would that deliberate and malicious right violation be morally justified? I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be. We can also apply the thought experiments which target consequentialism, like for example a form of the utility monster, and see if that contradicts what those vegans believe. Imagine some stupidly large number of minor rights violations, like finger poking someone in the shoulder without consent. And in order to prevent or minimize that enormous number of rights violations, one major right violation, like murder, needs to be committed. As far as I can see, the murder would be morally justified. But it doesn't even have to be about rights violations. It could prevent or minimize this utility. So imagine that stupidly large number but minor cases of this utility, like, I don't know, stubbing a toe. And in order to prevent or minimize that, a right must be violated. Some threshold deontologist would probably sign off on that being morally justified. In the thought experiment, the ones who walk away from omelas, threshold deontologists are the ones who wouldn't walk away if that torture of the child happens to minimize rights violations or disutility. Or they would walk away because torturing that child would be injustice. But then go back if that very injustice minimizes rights violations or disutility. Injustice would be morally justified.
Would you agree with me though that if like my wife ran out and didn't want to come home and I went and collected her and brought her home against her will and then used as a defense, that I thought it would stop greater rights violations, that they would throw me in prison anyway?
Well, if you could prove that, say, your wife was a psychotic murderer and she was like, I don't know, maybe going out with a machine gun to a shopping mall, I think you probably could make a good case that you were totally justified. If that's not the case, then yeah, if you just brought your wife home because, you know, she hated you, left, and then you brought her home, yeah, that's kidnapping.
The wife doesn't have to cause any rights violations. It just needs to be the case that kidnapping her would prevent or minimize rights violations, and that would be morally justified under threshold deontology. Nothing is sacred. And when it comes to rights, chances are other people don't share their views on rights. For an example.
What's interesting with what you said there is that it seems that your position is committing you to saying murder is wrong, it's a violation of rights, but genocide is okay if a certain threshold is met. Is that fair?
Yes, because every action that we consider wrong is gonna, at least for me, will become morally permissible if a certain threshold is met. Like if you had to, this sounds really dark, but like if you had to torture a single person to prevent infinite people from being tortured, I think torturing that single person is morally permissible. Are you violating the rights? Like, yeah, but we could say like it's a morally permissible rights violation. Depends how you word it.
Rights violations is bad until it isn't. Killing, torturing, and raping you is wrong as long as his threshold has not yet been met. The keywords are his and yet.
Is the moral value of a sardine the same as that of a human?
No, not for me.
Okay. So therefore there is X number of sardines that would make up collectively the same amount of moral value as a human being, correct?
Because I'm a threshold deontologist, for me, yes.
Okay, perfect. So then you believe that there is there's X amount of sardines that you would rather save that sardines than like a newborn, like a toddler.
For me, because I'm a threshold deontologist, yes, it would have to be a very high number.
What if that toddler is her own child? Does that mean she would rather save some X number of sardines over her own child? I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. The X number of sardines is still a greater number and has more moral value. And then we have something like this.
The problem is that you believe that like people who are unintelligent aren't worthy of like their life insofar as it would be morally justified to stab them to like eat them. That's concerning. If you think that, oh, we should just leave it up to people whether or not they want to feed them because they are disabled, that's just really messed up, man. And I don't know, like, you've signed off on some worrying stuff already, and I just think that I've got a good idea of what you think, and I don't think I want to proceed any further because I just don't like the way it's sounding. It sounds pretty messed up to me.
That's concerning and messed up, but somehow saving X number of sardines over a human child isn't. I'm pretty sure the ethics of those threshold deontologists would be concerning and messed up to many, many people in society. I think it's safe to say that threshold deontology is just consequentialism with one extra step. And it seems to me that many vegans just jump on the bandwagon without realizing what are the implications.